I'm back in the shop today working on the MD, and it's been a difficult couple of days where I've gone back and forth about what to do with this tractor. You all saw the last video and the kind of disaster that I found inside the engine. So at this point, I am faced with the decision to either do all or nothing. And for me, all is all. I don't do these things halfway. If I get in and I find it it's this bad. If I find it's this bad, it's time to take everything apart. Basically, transmission forward, tear this whole engine down. I'm going to get to that work process in a second, but first I want to show you something else. This is a Farmall H that I went through, it must be 10 years ago. It took me 2 years to go through this tractor. I took everything apart. I started with the transmission, took every bearing out of the transmission, cleaned it all up, replaced the bearings as needed. I worked my way forward. The engine is all new in this. This is not my first time at the rodeo. In fact, this is the 4th tractor I've done, and I've done about a half dozen so far. The Farmall H is comparatively easy to the MD because, as I keep saying, parts are easy to find. There's a dozen online sources for parts. They're cheap. They're easy to find. The MD is a whole different ballgame. This is like tractor restoration advanced version. So I have the experience to do it, and I've been through all these. My one regret on this tractor is I didn't use high quality paint. This was just Valspar paint out of the Tractor Supply big box store, and I've regretted that ever since. And she's a little dusty from sitting in the barn, but you guys that have watched the videos and seen this tractor at work, it runs great. It's just like new. That's what I would do with the MD. But the proof is in the pudding, right? Well, let me climb on, start her up, and you can see how she runs. If this MD was some tractor that I'd just run out and bought, and I was faced with this much money going into it, I don't know if I would do it. I may still do it, but this one is especially special because my dad bought this tractor around 1982, and we used it to farm until Dad quit farming, and then I used it a little bit in the early days before we started our own farm when I was redoing the house. So there's some sentimental attachment. You can look at tractors as just a dollars and cents equation. How much are you going to invest? What are you going to get out of it on the farm? But as you know, I argue in a lot of my videos that life is a lot more than just dollars and cents. You have to do the things that make you happy, and sometimes you're upside down in those things. This tractor will never be worth what I would put into it, but I enjoy doing the work. It gives me a satisfaction that's not measured in dollars. And so I've decided to go ahead with it. Now the next thing that came up right after the video came out on Tuesday is people started saying you should do a GoFundMe campaign. You should defray some of the costs. And I don't ask for charity. That's not me, and I don't know, it just rubs me the wrong way. If I'm asking for money to do this, there has to be something that you all get in return. And so I'm thinking about it this way, that it's going to cost me, I don't know, 10 grand. Let's just throw out a number, 10 grand. But in return, I'm giving just entertainment for some people, but for others an education in how to work on these old tractors and a record of this particular tractor and how it's built and what it takes to bring it back to working condition for those who want to take it on later. So I think I'm providing some value in exchange for any money that I receive. Yes, I do receive YouTube advertising money, but no, I don't receive enough where I'm going to shell out the money that this tractor would take on my own dime. So after Hillary and I talked about it, here's what we thought. I set up a GoFundMe account, and I'll put a link to that GoFundMe down in the video description. And I think that my goal for fundraising is about half of the cost of the parts for this tractor. So your donations would cover about half the costs. Hillary and I would pay for the rest. I'll put in all the labor. And that seems like a fair deal to me. It's I'm not asking for something for nothing. I'm providing something in return, and I can justify it to myself that way. In the couple days since Tuesday's video, I've sat down, done some research, and made some phone calls and come up with a parts list for this tractor in a basic budget, and here it is. Pistons and sleeves, $1,350. Piston rings, $170. Main bearings, $200. Rod bearings, $225. Head gasket and top end gasket kit, $285. Machine shop work, $800, and I'll get to that in a minute. Injection pump rebuild, $200, assuming I do it myself. Used distributor to replace the magneto, $225. Electronic ignition for that distributor, $135. Carburetor rebuild kit to do the rebuild myself with, $50. Front tires, $200. Front rims, $125. Paint, $350. I'm not cheaping out on the paint. This is decent quality urethane paint. New wiring harness, $150. Rear tire tubes, $100. If I go all the way through it, I'm going to want rear tires, but I'm only including the cost of new tubes in this. Alternator, $60. Battery, $120. If you add all those things up, that's $5,000. Now, this is a very optimistic estimate. I'm just going by what I see. I haven't torn the engine down all the way out. The big unknowns in this are what I'm going to run into with the head when it goes to the machine shop. Bad valves, the crack being worse than I think it is. New valve seats, I haven't included any of that, just basic machine shop work and cleanup. So there's a whole lot of unknowns. Anyway, my minimum budget is $5,000. I've heard from others you can easily spend $10,000 in these engines. I'm doing a lot of the work myself to save money. So my ask on GoFundMe is $5,000. That ask is not for the whole cost of doing this engine. It's a 50-50 deal. Hillary and I contribute 50%, viewers contribute 50%. I contribute all my labor. Yes, I love doing it. So it's a win-win for me. I think it's a win-win for you. I'm not coming with my hand out and asking for everything, but there's value provided to you, and I think that's worthwhile. If you do, you can donate. If you disagree, just don't donate. The link to the GoFundMe campaign is in the video description below, and you can find all the particulars if you click on the link contained there. Now, one other thing about the GoFundMe. As an added bonus, I'm going to clean up and send these pistons to the first 4 people that donate $200 or more, just the first 4 out of the gate. What I'll do is I'll remove the rings, I'll clean these all up. They'd make a really beefy paperweight. A decent remote control holder, as one viewer suggested, or if you get really mad at your spouse, you can kind of use them as a hammer. They're already damaged, so you can't do much more harm to them. So once again, first 4 viewers that donate $200 or more, I will mail one of these pistons to. All right, with all that out of the way, what's the plan of attack now with the tractor? Because it's really changed a lot. Well, now we're going into teardown mode. We're going to take off fuel tanks, take off the radiator, strip the engine block down to bare block, split the tractor, pull the engine block, take out the crankshaft, take out the camshaft, take the block, the crank, the cam, and the head up to the machine shop, have them evaluate the clearances on the camshaft, have them take a look at the crankshaft, have them mic it, have them polish or grind it as need be so I know what size bearings I need to order for it. The machine shop will also take care of the cylinder liners for me. I have pulled these dry sleeves before. They're no fun to pull. He has a great way of doing it. He puts it on a line boring machine, actually just bores the sleeves out. He bores them until he's got like a tinfoil thickness on the sleeves, and then he peels them out, cleans up the bore real good. I'll also have the machine shop set the new sleeves, check the clearances on the sleeves to the pistons. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. First thing I'm going to do is drain the fuel tank, and to do that I'm going to open up the fuel line where it comes into the fuel filters and let her drain. It's going to take a while. I think it's got about 5 gallons in it. And I'm just going to let that drain into a 5-gallon bucket. It'll take a while. Now, I have some company in the shop today. Hillary's wrapping Christmas presents in here because kids are home from school and there's no other place to do it. So you may hear some wrapping sounds in the background. While the fuel's draining on the other side of the engine, I'm going to strip down this side of the engine. this bracket that the generator was mounted to. I don't know what this is. If anybody does, let me know in the comments. It reminds me of the radiator shutter linkages that are on the dual fuel tractors, the kerosene and gasoline tractors, but I don't know what it's for on this one. I do have a parts book that would show me, and I haven't spent a lot of time researching that yet. So Hill, have you heard any good jokes lately?
No.
Not in months, right?
No, not in months.
Certainly not from me, you haven't heard any good jokes. Well, I might have a few to tell. All Hillary's heard from me are bad jokes. That's why she can always say she hasn't heard a good joke lately. Take this oil line off. This comes from the galley that runs along the camshaft side of the engine, goes up to the oil pressure gauge. You know, people say they pick their nose, but I think I was just born with mine.
That's bad.
Yeah, it is. Pull the magneto off. I don't think this is going back on. I think I'm going to get a distributor for it. Take this magneto drive housing off. This magneto drive bolt had a yellow washer on it. It must have come off of some broken down old John Deere. That drive gear certainly looks good. I hope the rest of the timing gears look that way too. Not a lot of play in the bearing, actually no play, no chipped teeth you want to look for, and you want to look for worn teeth that have run loose. I don't see any of that in here. Take off this gasoline starting tank. Fuel's done draining now, so we start taking off stuff to get the fuel tank off. I'm just going to clear some of this stuff out of the way, starting with the cable to the starter. It's all got to go eventually, and the order isn't really that important. You just strip it off as you feel like. Taking the fuel tank off is a lot easier if I can slide the steering wheel back. And to do that, I need to loosen the collar that holds it in place. It's just a Allen wrench, and then I can slide it back. This is a diesel throttle lever. It just comes right back. Most of the time. Hey, Hill, did you hear about the circus fire?
No.
It was intense. This gauge assembly here needs to come off to make things easier to work at, taking the tank off. And I just got to undo this linkage from the diesel throttle and pull it off, and then it'll slide right out. There's a slot in the end and it crimps onto the shaft, so usually the easiest way is to drive it open with a chisel and then slide it off. A cold chisel, that is, not a wood chisel. These are the gauges that you see out from the hood when you're sitting on the tractor. Because this is a diesel tractor, it's got two fuel lines into the tank. This one's the supply line that goes to the fuel filters. This is the return line out of the injection pump. And you gotta take them both off to pull the tank. This is the other end of the return line where it comes out of the injection pump. How do you come out of there? Now we can take the main fuel tank off. I got to take off this support arm, and this connects to the gasoline diesel actuation lever that switches it from one to the other. And then I'm going to take this support assembly that holds the air cleaner and the two fuel tanks off. This here is the linkage to the lever that switches it from gasoline to diesel. We'll get that out of the way. Next, I'm going to disconnect the lines that go to the fuel filters here and unbolt it from the engine block, take it off. And there is another fuel line here that comes from the injection pump into the fuel filter that's got to come off as well. Oh, what a mess. There we go. And there's one more fuel line that runs from the top of the injection pump into the back of the fuel filters that's got to come off. It's a lot more complicated plumbing than a modern injection pump. All these interconnections between the fuel filters and the injection pump. And now I can pull this entire filter assembly off. There's just 2 mounting bolts onto the engine block. They're not particularly easy to get at. Don't want to break that water trap. It's glass. There we go. No stamped steel mounting brackets for these. This is cast. Sucker is thick. Whoops. Good thing I like the smell of diesel fuel. That's wrapping paper. You want to hear a joke about paper?
Okay.
Nah, it's terrible. Next, I'll take this linkage off, and this whole business here connects to this rod that goes through the engine block and goes to work the manifold and the carburetor on the other sides. This whole thing controls the switching of gas to diesel on the engine. It's pretty complicated. This right here that I'm taking off is the injector pump throttle that controls the RPMs of the engine. Now I want to get a good photo of this linkage before I go any further. Wowie. There we go. This is the other side of that linkage. And I think I'm going to try disconnecting it on this side and then pulling it out the other side. We'll see how that works. It's so covered in grease you can't really see what the outline is, but apparently it engages this side, which is held on by this big bolt. And probably a little bolt buried under there too. Isn't that interesting? Be cool to get this cleaned up and see how it all works. If you have to drive a bolt out from the nut end of the bolt, you can put the nut back on, tighten it down a little bit, and that way you won't bugger up the threads on the end of the bolt while you're driving it through the hole. This has got a tapered pin on it that draws it in and holds it tight to the shaft. See? That's a tapered pin that's holding that all on. Now this should come right off, yeah. There's a slot in the shaft right here, and the pin inside this piece goes down into it and holds it in place with respect to the shaft when the shaft turns. And now this pin should push through. Ha! Let's see what it does on the other side. Turn it. Oh, turn it out. And there we go. Now we can take this big hunk of metal off and we'll have all the linkages off the engine. Looks like there's a set of friction discs in here. So this plate rotates and this keeps it from being too easy to turn so it flops back. And then there's a spring on the other side that holds it in position as well. And this fell down when I took it out, and that's the little washer that goes in there. Here's where the shaft goes through the engine. It's getting to be mid-afternoon and it's almost chore time for me, so it's time to quit, but we made decent progress. The tractor's getting smaller, which is what should be happening. What are the next steps? The next steps are to pull the radiator, and then we'll put a jack underneath the bell housing to support the tractor, and I'll pick the front bolster and the front wheels off with the A-frame. And then I'll be free to work on the front end of the engine to pull the timing cover off, look at the timing gears. And from there, I'll be able to split the engine off the tractor, take it off with the hoist, and then we'll be left with just the clutch housing and the transmission and the rear end of the tractor, and free to strip off the engine to get it ready for the machine shop. This video is a day early today because Christmas is tomorrow and I'm observing Christmas. I hope you have a great Christmas, and I'll see you next time.